Welcome back to Making Our Way. We have a really special episode for you today. We are talking about caregiving, but not just caregiving. We're talking about a superpower sort of strength and survival and the weight that we carry when nobody else is watching. And also, we're going to talk about the whole idea of when you think you have nothing left to give, how do you dig deeper and find strength to do perhaps what you think can't be done? So our topic's caregiving today, but I think this is applicable to anybody listening. It's really just about life. And I'm super excited to bring in my friend, Sheryl Marazzo. Sheryl is a long timer in this Duchenne community, and she has a ton of wisdom and heart, and she is a gift to all of us. Welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to jump in because you have a lot to say. So talk to me about let's go back. We'll kind of begin at the beginning. I know there will be some things you want to share, prior to diagnosis, but let's talk about the moment, maybe the day, the moment, the time frame when the one of many times that your life sort of turned on a dime and you got the diagnosis for Jake. Can you just share a little bit about what that looked like and felt like for you and your family?
Absolutely. I think all of us, whether it's Duchenne or whatever disease it is, you know where you were, what time of day it was, what the weather was like that day, what you had on for clothes. I think we all remember that. I actually used to sell surgical tables, and I was at a clinical trial at a big hospital in Massachusetts. And kind of going back before that, I think I just went right to that day, but let me just go back and set the stage a little bit before that. Jake was a very anxious child, super anxious, didn't like tags in his shirt, couldn't have lines in his socks. And I'm sure a lot of other people are like, yes, we're going through the same thing. It's sort of an OCD anxiety thing. And I took him to a medical center to get him tested for whatever it could be. I thought, could he be autistic? Could he be anxious? Could he be this? Could he be that? And so we just went and had him tested. And yes, he was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. That was before we heard the word Duchenne. Going through Jake's anxiety, which he still struggles with to this day, it was horrible. We tried different medications. We tried therapy. We tried patience. We tried me running out of the house screaming my head off because I wasn't sure I could take it any longer. And we ended up finding the right therapist. We found some medications where Jake didn't want to commit suicide on. And, imagine like a 6-7-year-old son telling you that they want to end their life. It's pretty awful. So we finally got some of that put together, but I still knew something was off with him. And my pediatrician said, something's going on. I'm going to send you to a genetic specialist. We went to Boston. Jake had to give his blood, and he was wondering when it would be given back to him after they took it away, which I told him that he wasn't getting his blood back. They were keeping it. And then, so let's go back to what I was just talking about, where I was in the operating room, just finishing a case, heading upstairs to change into my street clothes to head home for the day. And I get a call from the genetic doctor. And she said, Jake's CK level was really high. And I'm like, CK level? I don't even know what the heck she's talking about. And she said, you need to come back and we need to redo the test. So I said, okay, can I come back next week? I'm in the middle of this clinical trial. And she said, no, you need to come back tomorrow. Now, she told me she was testing for Fragile X and muscular dystrophy. So when she said that, we Googled it. And that's when I saw Duchenne for the first time, had never heard of it before. And my husband and I cried because we knew that's exactly what it was. He had been misdiagnosed prior to that as a toe walker, as anxiety, as all these different things. So finally we got this answer, but we weren't really sure it was the answer that we really wanted.
How long ago was that, Sheryl?
It was, it was in 2011.
Okay.
That we actually got the Duchenne diagnosis. And at the time, there were no clinical trials for our particular mutation.
Yep. Yep, and our boys are around the same age, and I experienced the same thing. There were no standards, really standards of care at that time. It was a completely different landscape, and so much has changed. But if we stick with that a little bit about where you were at that time, um, what did that do to you as a mom? What did what shifted for you?
Actually shifted a lot of my mindset, and I think we all go through that grief process. I've lost people that I love in my life, and it's the same sort of process that you go through. It's almost anticipatory at this point with Jake. I grieved, the life that I thought we would have, and you know, John and I tried. I my first two children are from my first marriage, and John and I tried to have a baby, and it didn't happen, didn't happen, didn't happen. So then, it finally happened, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have this great life. Jake is going to play basketball. He's going to, do all of these amazing things, doctor, lawyer, whatever he chose to be. And in that moment, you almost felt like those hopes and dreams were dying on the vine. They were just getting brown and dying. And the life that you thought you would have, you come to the realization that you're not going to have it. It's not going to be like
Mhm.
that. And at that time, you're not thinking about hope. You're not thinking about what could be. You're thinking, my son, maybe he might not graduate high school. Maybe he won't
Yeah,
go to college. Maybe he won't find love, whatever that looks like for him.
yeah,
And um, you're in such a desolate, desperate place, and no one understands what you're going through. And even John and
yeah,
I, men and women are different. We dealt with it a little differently. Um, I hopped right into reading every book I could on the topic, researching, which at the time there was not much research happening. So we cried for weeks. I walked in a fog. Um, I was walking down this tunnel, and life was going on around me, but I was still lost and stuck in this tunnel. But we were just devastated of what we thought our life would be like, and how am I going to afford this? What if I'm a carrier of the, what if my daughter's a carrier? Like, there's so many things, anger, guilt, frustration, all these things that you go through. And then eventually you get to where you find acceptance. And gosh, I wish I could sit with myself in that changing room
yeah.
today and share what our life actually turned out to be, much different than I thought it would be.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think what could I have said to my younger self on diagnosis, at that time of diagnosis, how could I have coached myself? Sometimes I think there just is no way around the process of, that learning where it's your own process. So, but share with me, because you talk about how you felt initially in the loss of those hopes and dreams and what you thought your life would look like, and you realized it didn't. And you said something, I think that's really interesting. You said acceptance. You had to get to a point of acceptance. But that's not natural for everyone, and it doesn't happen for everyone. How would you say that you got from this point of intense grief and fear and denial and focusing on the losses to a point of acceptance? And I would actually say, because I know your family a little bit, to beyond acceptance, to really on a lot of days thriving. How did that happen?
Well, I can tell you it was words from someone very wise, who is Mr. John Marazzo, my husband. He said, we can sit around for 10 years and be sad and worry. And that's 10 years of Jake's life that will go by, that we will miss. And in that moment, I realized that life is such a gift, and no one really treasures it as they should. And my story does not come without challenges, as you know. While I was dealing with Duchenne, I was also dealing with a son who was a heroin addict. So I have two boys, and sometimes I get a little misty when I think about this. I had two boys that had diseases that I couldn't save them from. Neither one of them. I couldn't save them from it. And sometimes you have to push them in a direction that you don't want to. It's hard to be a mom of an addict. It's also hard to be a mom of someone who's anxious and has Duchenne. So I think my son Cletus, when I practiced trying to do the right thing, he taught me a lot about how I should be a mom and how I shouldn't be a mom. And again, I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I think all of your challenges in your life are there for a reason to um, put you in a position to maybe help that earlier self, right? With Cletus, I started Naranon groups, and I invited people dealing with this disease that people had so many horrible things to say about, and it must be the parents, and there's so many things. And I think if you know us, we're pretty good people, and so these things unfortunately happen to everyone. But it took me therapy. It took me learning how to take care of myself, learning how to take care of my relationships, and pushing people into a point that they were uncomfortable. And when I say that, I mean Jake and Cletus, pushing them to a point where they feel uncomfortable. And when John said that, um, it just like poof,
Yeah.
like that's right. I could be sad all
Yep.
the time, but I choose not to. And happiness begins right here.
Yeah.
You have to start here, and it takes a
I
lot of
think
work.
so this is what I want to talk about this for a second, because I think people think they see the external, right? They see you right here and they see me in many circumstances where I'm having a really great day and I'm happy. But I think something we don't honor is that multiple emotions can coexist in one person and even in one moment at the same time. And so I think it's really helpful to talk about how the heartache and the grief evolves over time. And I think just time in general softens the edges of those things. You said Cletus taught you so much about how to be a mom, how not to mother him, how to mother him. What do you think your greatest takeaways from Cletus are? What were the lessons that he taught you?
So he taught me so much, and just we didn't really discuss it, but he's been gone for 2 years. He passed away from fentanyl poisoning, and I find that when I share my story, I allow others space to share their own. I was just recently at a workshop, and I don't want to go into too much, but yeah, I share my story and I honor all three of my children. And
Yeah.
then inevitably someone will come up to me and say, I've been there. I lost a brother. I lost a
Mhm.
spouse. So there is space for it. And I think when I open that dialogue, I make people feel that it's not something to be ashamed of.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I realize that love isn't always what you think it is. Sometimes to
Mm.
love someone, you have to make a choice that tears your heart apart. One
Mhm.
particular time I'll always remember, my husband was traveling. Cletus was homeless at the time and knocked on my door in the pouring rain. And he wanted to come in, and I couldn't let him because he was using. And I had to turn him away. I gave him, a couple of quarters because at that time you could use a payphone to call for help. And I would have driven him somewhere if he needed to go somewhere for treatment. But turning my back on my son is what inevitably saved him enough to come back to us before
Mhm.
before he was gone. And I was just reading a book this morning that said that death is not because of an illness. Death is because you are complete, you are done
Yeah.
on this earth. And that gave me so much comfort this morning. I can't even tell you. But love is really doing what is best for the other person and not what is best
Mm.
for you oftentimes.
Yeah.
And that is a hard lesson. But it also helped me push Jake way outside his comfort zone. And I'd like to think that it was part of why he is, who he is today and some of the experiences that he's learned.
So I I think, gosh, Cheryl, what you just said about love, I think, hearing your story, we would say something like, well, that's tough love. And it sounds like it's really just love. It's love. It's just love in all its different forms. And um and I mean this actually literally, that I can't imagine. I can't imagine what you went through. and how difficult that was for you. And to hear you say, I turned my back on him, and just what sprung to mind so immediately for me is, yeah, but you opened your heart to him in the way that he needed it open to you. Um, and I think, would you say that your evolution, your growth about what really does it mean to love someone, that is one of the greatest things that Cletus taught you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he was very special, and he knew my boundaries. He knew that mom
Mhm.
doesn't mess around, and I would only do things that were healthy, right? I mean, it was things that were healthy that he needed.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about addiction, typically that's when they get better, is when no one is there to enable them and to help them.
Mhm.
And if you think
Yeah.
giving them $5 is helping them, you're mistaken. I am so thankful that Cletus came back to us before he left, because I think it would have been much worse then. But I know what it feels like to lose a child. And now that Jake is 22, that anticipatory stuff, whew,
Yeah.
it hits you.
So, Cheryl, just for a minute, so for everybody listening or watching who doesn't know the depth of your story, when you say Cletus came back to you before he left you, will you just expand on that a little bit? What happened in your family at that time, and what that means that he came back to you?
It was such a beautiful thing. So my son is very was very religious, and that's cool if that works for you. I'm not.
Hmm.
I still have some questions that I'm trying to dance around there with that.
Hmm.
But he went to a program for broken people, not addiction, not. He was broken. The addiction was the band-aid, right? He was a broken soul, and he went to this place, and man, he hated being there. And I remember dropping him off. I have the picture of it, and I can still see it in my mind. He smoked his last cigarette, and he was ready. He knew this was it, man. Like he knew it. And we went up to visit him, and I saw this butterfly, caterpillar butterfly. He was Cletus. If you knew
Wow.
Cletus before addiction came into his life, he was the kindest. Everybody wanted to be his friend. He was an amazing athlete, like all of these beautiful things. And he came back for 6 months before he ended up passing away. He repaired his relationship with his sister, which made it
Mm.
harder, I think, on her. Jake didn't really know him, right? Because he wasn't around a lot. He
Yeah.
repaired that relationship. He repaired relationships. He got his license. He got his life back on track. And I was able to
Yeah.
trust him, which was a huge step for me. John and I were able to just trust him. And he was going in the right direction, man. And he was happy. I would watch him listen to a TV show, and he would laugh. I hadn't heard that in so long, and it was just so beautiful to see. And going back a little bit, when my right before my mom passed away, she also rallied a little bit, and I feel like people do that to help you get through the grief. Is they come
Yeah.
back to you, show you that beautiful true self, and then they sail away, to a different place, and you wave goodbye. And I hope that on the other side, people were waving hello. I talk to him every day. When I meditate, I talk to him. I feel him. Um, so it was just such a beautiful experience for us that helped. It helped me, and I don't cry every day. I
Yeah.
cry days, and when it first happened, obviously it was much more raw. But I always think about how he would want me to be, and he want me to keep going forward and to not be
Yeah.
sad. He felt where he was going was a good place, and that I shouldn't worry about him.
Wow. What a gift to you. I mean, painful, but my goodness, just to have those 6 months of um joy and peace with him. You mentioned that when Cletus came back to you for the 6 months, you heard him laugh. And I remember when Joseph was diagnosed, I could not imagine ever laughing again. I couldn't imagine feeling any kind of joy or happiness or any lightness. Um, and sometimes when we least expect it, it sneaks up on us, and we realize, okay, the edges are softening, and there is something more out there. What So today, and I want to talk, of course, a little bit more about Jake and about you as a caregiver and all that you do. But before we go there, sort of on this path, I want to transition into talking about connecting and people and some of the nuances of being a caregiver, because Cheryl, you have such a beautiful take on it. Will you describe what so let me say this: when our boys are getting older, they need a lot of care and a lot of support. So in Duchenne, as the disease progresses, our boys lose abilities and lose the ability, to walk. Most those people above, in late teens or early adulthood, are in a power wheelchair, lose some arm function, and really need support and assistance with everything they do throughout their day. Um, and we, as you and I've talked about, we're getting older, and so, but as we're getting older, their needs are getting greater. And you are a caregiver to Jake. Will you just talk a little bit about your thoughts in general on caregiving and how it's changed over time for you, and just, tips, or what your experience has been?
I find that caregiving for Jake is kind of like when you find out you're pregnant and it's not about you anymore. It's about
Mm,
that person, that baby. Um, you make changes based on that. And Jake has a lot of anxiety. I get a lot of text messages that are sometimes laced with profanity, and he's having issues. I'm the go-to. I am the
yeah.
person that he asks for support. And that goes, I have to get him up. He can't even sit up in bed. I have to get him up. I have to put clothes on him. And he
Hmm.
wakes, he's smiling. He's happy. He doesn't even think about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then, but it's not, I'm not always happy with caregiving. I have to be honest with you. Some days it stinks. It stinks to try to talk people down from ledges sometimes. It stinks that we try to go to a restaurant and it's accessible. There's only a few stairs and you can't get in
Yeah.
there. And I think sometimes for me, the worst part is seeing his sadness. I have my own sadness, but I'm an adult. Oh, I'd like to think I am anyway. And I think I can manage it better. But when you're, 22, graduating college, have no idea what's going to happen with the rest of your life,
Mhm.
he's scared. And it's
Yeah.
my job to not get him through it, but to offer suggestions, offer what's
Yeah.
worked for me, right? Because you can't tell someone what to do. This is what worked for me. And I think about him coming back from school and he's scared, but so am I. I'm
Yeah.
like, I work from home. My husband does not.
Yep.
So there have been cases where Jake's like, hey, nobody can take me to the bathroom. And I have to drive down there and take him to the bathroom, which I would do happily. But sometimes I'm like, I'm overwhelmed because
Hmm.
caregiving for Jake's not my only job, right? I also
Right.
have to think about shopping, dinner, taxes that I had to pay yesterday, um, all of the other things that we do as caregivers that aren't hands-on caregiving, which makes me crazy with when they offer you hours for personal care assistance. They only offer, okay, well, you're doing this now. Nothing about the paperwork that you have to do, the timesheets you have to
Right.
approve, all the other things you have to do. It's only direct care that they get. That's their
Yeah.
benefit, right? And when I used to have to brush his teeth and I used to have to do all these things for him, yeah, I can't say I loved every minute of it, and I'm being totally honest.
I think that's so, so important. I think we have there's something that goes on about caregiving where there's like this pressure to portray it in this light of, nobility and grace, and it's, we don't talk about the moments where we literally want to walk out the front door and not come back.
Hmm.
And that, in the light of our, talking earlier about love, it has nothing to do with love. It has to do with being human
Yes.
and just the humanity of this dynamic. And Shirley, I think you saying this, the parts that you say stink, it's so important because and this isn't even about just Duchenne, and it's not about rare disease. This is about life. I mean, we have a caregiving epidemic and crisis in just here in our country, in the United States. Most people at some point in their lives will be a caregiver. So I think this really honest conversation about, this can be really hard. It doesn't have anything to do with your level of caring or love for the person for whom you're a caregiver. It just has to do with basic human needs that everybody has.
Hmm.
So how do you one of the things I've heard people talk about, and you've mentioned this before, is like when you have so much responsibility to be there for another person. And this could be, for you it's Jake, for me it's Joseph, but I had it with my parents. I had it for my dad, when I was caregiving for him at the end of his life, and for my mom at the end of her life. And you have this responsibility and also a desire. I mean, it is an honor and it's a gift in so many ways. And there's beautiful parts of, an intimacy in your relationship with somebody when you're so immersed in their daily life. But there's sometimes not a lot left at the end of the day. And so how do you navigate that idea of losing, like your sense of self and who you are?
Hmm.
And have you ever had any wake up calls? Like, and I'll just say this, for me, it was when my counselor one time, she said, tell me about, we were talking about, the heavy load that we carry. And she said, tell me about your hobbies. And I was like,
Do I have any?
oh my God, what a horrible question to ask someone. I don't have what do you mean my hobbies? Um, Sleeping is my hobby. And it's just that was a awakening for me, where I had this realization that I need to try to be a whole person. Tell me about what that's looked like for you.
I think for me, I look for ways to be Cheryl, and not to be
Mm,
mom, not to be wife, not to be
yeah.
Grammy, not to be any of those other titles, but I try to look for things that are for Cheryl, whether it
Mhm.
be getting on my Nordic track bike and riding in the Swiss Alps,
Yeah.
whether it be just stretching, whether it be just sitting by myself. I get up early so I can sit by myself and have
Mhm.
coffee. My dog doesn't get the deal, but my husband, we're like, good morning. There's no talking until after that cup
Yeah.
of coffee. And I find that to be super, super important. But I always look for ways to be Cheryl, whether it's getting a camera and driving to the beach and taking pictures
Mhm.
that are from Cheryl, um, whether it's doing something that has nothing to do with Duchenne, addiction, mom, Grammy. I
Mhm.
think it's important to find those things. I'm not saying it's always easy because I know it's not.
So and I love that perspective, because you don't talk about, take a vacation or, take a girls trip for a week. It's just little teeny things. But even though you're so conscious of that, and you're committed to that, and that idea of really taking care of yourself, do you ever feel like you're just going to lose it?
All the time.
Like you're just done?
Yep. Um, I remember my mom went through being a single parent, having children, lack of support, and I watched her have a nervous breakdown. I've seen it.
Mm.
I've seen how getting to that point is too much, and I think you need to learn yourself. And I've oftentimes been like, you know what? I'm in the car. I could just keep going. I got plenty of money in the savings account.
Yeah,
I could just keep going.
I got gas.
Yeah. And
Let's
like, what
go.
else do I need? Right. And honest, I always say I'm like going to run away screaming or laughing, one of the two. And then I think I need to take some stock and be like, okay, so I'm trying to help my son be less anxious and do all these things. I really got to sometimes, and you may feel the same way as I am so good at telling others to take care of themselves, but I don't
Yeah.
always do it here. I try, and I
Mhm.
also try to list out every day the things that I want to get done, whether it's workout, eat healthy,
Yeah.
read, stretch, all those things. I need to make sure I accomplish them. And sometimes writing them down, crossing them off, you feel like you've had success that day. And the
Yeah.
next day may just turn to crap and
Yep.
I don't write it down. I don't do it. And then I feel that feeling start to creep back. And I'm like, come on, Cheryl, you know what to do.
Yeah.
But you always know the right thing to do. The hard part is actually doing it, right?
I know. So true. I know I've had days where um I make my list to do, and then it all falls apart. But at the end of the day, I'll think, well, what did I actually do? And sometimes I go in retroactively put something on my list
Yes.
just so I can cross it
Yes.
off. Like I took a shower. I I made a sandwich, and I'm like, oh, need to eat today, and I add it to the list, and then I check it off like with a sense of accomplishment, because we can't do it all. And so Cheryl, in the spirit of honesty, and in us kind of pulling back the curtain on, caregiving, when you really pause, because you do pause, when you do pause, and if you let your mind go, What do you feel most fearful of?
Loss.
Mm,
um, but not loss in a sense that maybe you think about, but losses collectively over time, they're snowballs, right? They get bigger and bigger,
mhm.
and sometimes,
Yeah.
what if I don't have the right thing to say? And then I have to learn I
Uh,
can't make everybody feel better. I can't, as
mhm.
much as I want to. I think you have to learn that you can't. And we always have this thing is always back here tapping me on the shoulder, like, don't forget about me. I'm still here. You may be pretending today that I don't exist, but I'm still here.
Mhm.
And to just sort of accept it, deal with that emotion.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a fire in someone's house, right? You have this beautiful oriental rug, and there's a fire in your house, and the firefighters come in and they're trying to put the fire out, but you're trying to save the rug. Like, you have to look at things on a bigger scale sometimes when you have these
Yep.
things to deal with. And it's not always about me. In fact, it's hardly ever about me anymore, if you think about it, right? It's always about that. But I feel like I want to Jake and I are very close. We talk about things that people will probably never talk about with their parents. I never even
Yeah.
ever would talk with my parents about. And I think we're super close. And I think the accepting the part that I can't always make him feel better. And sometimes
Mm,
that's not what I'm supposed to do in the moment. I'm just supposed to listen.
yeah.
But as he loses, upper body function, as he loses the ability to hug me, as he loses more and more ability, he's struggling with it. I love him. I'm already struggling with it. So now I'm
Yeah.
struggling with it twice.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And in terms of fighting the emotion, I've done it. I want to pretend I don't feel sad or pretend I don't feel grief. And what I've found is that you really suffer twice because ultimately it's not going to go away. At some point, it will present itself. And I always say either you deal with your stuff or your stuff deals with you.
Hmm.
And if we can find a way to submit and just humble ourselves to knowing that we don't know what's coming next. And that is not about Duchenne. That is about being human and about life. Is none of us knows what is around the corner in a year. None of us literally knows what's outside the door
Hmm.
when we walk out of here, wherever we are at this moment. When you walk out of here, you literally do not know what's coming. And that can be terrifying, but it can also be so liberating. I'm not in charge. It's not up to me. I don't get to determine what comes next. I can influence our lives. I can influence how it feels every day. But we don't get to decide what is handed to us, what hand we're dealt. Um, and I just think it's really helpful to talk about those types of things of kind of navigating we have to do in our own heads. Who are we? Are we leading ourselves to the life that we want to live? And that is, I think we don't talk about it sometimes because it is a big deal and it's a big task. And nobody ever taught us how to do this.
No.
There's no instruction manual that came with this. And Cheryl, so in light of that, to somebody who's newly diagnosed, we talk about instruction manuals, which there isn't one. If somebody's newly diagnosed or they're just grappling with something really difficult in their lives, maybe they're watching or listening and they're like, I'm not personally affected by Duchenne, but I love a good story. Um, or somebody who's caring for a parent or a child, what would be your advice to them
Oof, that's a good question. I
in
think.
30 seconds or
All
less?
right, let me think of something quick. I think it's hang in there. I think you need to offer them, I'm here. You want to call me? You want to text me? You want to cry with me? I will sit with you. I will listen to you. I will not offer advice. I will tell you that I've been there and that here's what I did to get through it and to be whole
Yeah.
again, or at least 80% whole. Um, but I think it's important to let them be in the space, let them know it's going to be okay someday. And you're in an ocean. The ocean is never going to change, but you will learn
Right.
how to swim in it. But I think I just always say, you know what? Hang in there, hugs. I'm sending you so much love. Um, and I'm here.
You are the best. I want to ask you one final question. If your life was a book, what what would the title be?
It would be My Scarred Heart, because I literally have fibrosis on my heart, and I
Mm,
literally have been scarred throughout my life. And scarred hearts still beat, and they still
absolutely.
have love feelings in them. So, and I totally just made that up on the spot. So,
That was amazing. Yeah, I did not prep you with that question, and you just man, that was a home run, my friend. So, Cheryl, oh my goodness, thank you. I feel like I just was given the biggest gift by just hearing your insights and your wisdom. And oh my goodness, to everybody out there watching or listening, I hope that you just enjoyed hearing Cheryl. Whatever it is you're carrying up your mountain, because we know that everybody's walking some kind of a path. Everybody has a mountain to climb at some point in your life. And knowing Cheryl in the way that I do, um, my parting wish for all of you is number one, my parting wish is that if you loved what you heard with Cheryl today, that you share this with other people. But my wish for all of you is that you are able to find your Cheryl in whatever it is you're walking through.